Florida State opens the 2024 season as a top 10 team. What does that mean for the Noles long term?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for hitting that like button and that notification bell and subscribing to this podcast. Truly appreciate you making this your first listen each and every day. Love talking Noles, so please stop by as often as you can. Today's show is going to be fun because it's about something that's positive throughout. I don't often get to do that in college football, no matter what the discussion point is, but today is going to be that day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down and the sports stop sporting like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all its customers with a booster of bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone each and every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the polls came out at the end of last month, the first one, the coaches poll. Florida State's number 10. I didn't do a podcast like I'm doing today on it because I wanted to have more verification. That's just one poll. And B, I wanted it to be verification from some people that I trusted. Talking to a few people, just in personal conversations, as well as other podcasters and Athlon and different companies, just adding it up. This is the first time I've seen true optimism outside of, the homer picks among Florida State people. Every media group has their own homer picks. I read some today that I will ignore, but there are certain groups outside that could care less that are ranking Florida State very high. What does that mean? That is what we're going to investigate today and why it's so important long-term is it impacts recruiting. It impacts the media long-term coverage, which again impacts recruiting. Everything comes back to that. We're going to break that down today, and it's a lot of fun. So first off, I'm just going to read off the poll that came out about a week ago. Again, I waited for a reason, and I'll get more into that in a second. But here's the poll that Florida State is in. It's the coaches poll. And I find it interesting because just about everybody copied the first 4 or 5 teams, but then it just goes all over the map. Here's what the coaches poll has. Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Bama. That's your top 5. Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, Florida State round out the top 10. Now you're saying, well, being in the top 10 is good, but it's not like it's elite. Well, consider the following. Give credit. I read this on Chop Chat, one of the Florida State sites online. This is the first time they've been in the top 10 preseason since 2017. Hard to believe that a program with as much rich history as Florida State hasn't hit the top 10 in the polls since 2017. So again, this comes back to recruiting, exposure, having positive vibes, fans being into it. It is just, everything is positive with that. The other part with it that I think is really unique, again, this is a coaches poll. You're getting the respect of your peers. I always liked that better than the AP personally. I know that beyond the top 10, a lot of coaches just kind of throw in things and they have interns and stuff fill them out. But the top 10 teams, you kind of know, even if you're coaching in a different conference than some of these teams, you're going to see highlights, talk to coaches, etc., behind the scenes about the elite programs. It's just the way it works. I mean, I've talked to coaches for years about this kind of stuff. They know who the top teams are. After you get past number 10, maybe number 12, it gets really dicey. I get it. And this year, it's probably a little more than normal. It could be somewhere in between 6 and 10 based on some of the polls I've seen, just magazines and whatnot. But again, respect from the coaches poll, in my opinion, until the one that really amounts to something, and that's the college football playoff poll. That's not till, I believe, going to be talking about October 30th, give or take, so somewhere around Halloween. That's the most important, obviously. But here's something else to look at. As Florida State goes into this season, this is the first time they will officially be the hunted instead of the hunter. This is good for 2 reasons. Number one, we're going to find out what they're made of because they play Georgia Tech on the 24th, and that's only 18 days from now. It's kind of hard to believe it's so close. We're 2.5 weeks from the Noles, taking on the Yellow Jackets. And there's nobody picking Georgia Tech to win again, except for like their own homer media. Nobody's picking the Tech. the Tech team to win. But you better come out and you better be ready. So all this poll and everything, it's a motivation because I guarantee you what I just said, every person on Florida State staff, it's an old nauseum, they're going to be saying, everybody's picking you guys. You better be ready. Don't lay an egg. Don't be that team. They're trying to do different things to motivate them because polls can cause you to trip up. But I'm excited for that because, again, 7 years is a long time. We should be excited about Florida State being at the front of the pack. We'll talk about the ACC poll in a few moments, but it's really a good sign. And there's not going to be any hiding. They're not playing a directional school to start the year. They're not even playing a lower-end ACC team. This is somebody that can beat anybody on a given weekend. They beat North Carolina last year when they had Drake May. I mean, like, this is a team that's why. They beat Miami. Like, they can also go down. If you do not take them seriously, we'll know if Florida State on this poll I just looked at and just read off here on Locked On Seminoles is real. I love that. Don't mess around. You've got a great coaching staff, got a lot of experience, especially up front, returning on the offense, defensive lines. You should be in a pretty good spot to accept this position in the poll. And to be honest, I could see why they might be a little higher. Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, any of those, I could see Florida State ahead, especially Notre Dame just lost their left tackle. I don't know if anybody heard that, but Charles Jackasaw is out for the year for Notre Dame. He's got some kind of upper body injury. I don't know if Notre Dame is going to be top 10 without him. That's a really tough loss for the Irish. But again, Florida State number 10. Before I finish up this segment, final point. This is also a chance with the Georgia Tech game, Florida State coming in as a top 10 team. How good is DJ Uiagalelei in a Florida State uniform? I don't care what he did at Clemson. Care less. He had a pretty good year at Oregon State last year. Wasn't great, but that was a run-first team, a lot of play action, taking deep shots, etc. How good is he under the pressure again? The knock on him when he was at Clemson is that he wasn't consistent, especially in big moments for the Tigers. Okay. Oregon State's not the same deal. I mean, they had a pretty good football team, really good coaching staff. They just don't get the attention. It's just not fair, but it's true. They're not in the same stratosphere with Clemson. So we're going to find out a little bit about DJ and what he can do because the pressure will be on him. Fifth-year senior, certainly has experience. Like the offensive line of Florida State's ridiculously experienced. They had so many guys come back, and I'm still shocked they had as many as they did. I think that he should be at least a guy that is a plus quarterback, not a Heisman candidate or whatever, but as a fifth-year senior at the top 10 ranking, the pressure of being at Florida State, the pressure of starting for a team that has lost a quarterback going to the NFL, all of that should be a positive because that doesn't motivate you. Why are you at Florida State? He seems like a pretty mature guy. I don't know him, but all of those things should be a positive. That's something to think about. Coming up next on Locked On Seminoles, I was a little bit surprised about the ACC poll. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Seminoles. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and fewer games are being played, that's okay. FanDuel is letting everyone keep the sports going whenever they want. All you have to do is open up the FanDuel app, come up with bets at any time that you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all of its customers with a booster of bonus each and every day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in. It's a lot of fun. We're to the time of the year that all Florida State fans like, and that's talking Noles football right before the first game. Again, we're only 18 days out from the Noles taking on the Yellow Jackets, so thank you again. And for your second listen, take out the time to watch Locked On College Football with my friend Spencer McLaughlin. He gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron across college football with discussions on the upcoming season and ever-changing landscape, college athletics, conference realignment, you name it, everything coming on with the portal, NIL, and all the different things with the playoffs. Locked On College Football is available to you on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts like Odyssey, on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. So with the ACC poll, maybe it's just the pessimist in me, despite Florida State being undefeated last year, and despite a lot of talent coming into the portal, a really good recruiting class, and several guys coming back, like, you got Darius and Maurice up front. You've got Byers up front. You've got a really loaded running back room. You got the transfers on defense. Marvin Jones, you got him opposite Patrick Payton. You got other guys they're competing with for reps because the defensive end is a really deep spot. Defensive tackles, got Jackson playing, all those guys. And then a secondary that I listened to the Nolecast the other day. Bud and those guys, they did a great job breaking down the secondary. They can't even figure out as diehard Florida State fans and grads which guys are going to start at every position because there's a lot of talent. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. They might rotate some guys depending on matchups. All of that aside, I still didn't think Florida State was going to be the number one pick in the coaches poll. I thought it was going to be Clemson. Or excuse me, the media poll for the ACC. It came out. Here's what they had at ACC Media Day. So this is the media picks. Take it for what it's worth. I just brought up the top 5. If you want to go, we can go. I guess I could read the whole thing just for fun. But Florida State is number 1. They got 81 first place votes. That's a lot. The second was Clemson, which not shocking, but they only had 55. That is way off from what I thought. So I was definitely wrong. Miami was 3rd. I kind of expected that, but there's so much iffiness in the media. I can just tell you that firsthand from off-the-record conversations about Mario Cristobal. They got 17 first-place votes. NC State got 8. 5th place was Louisville, but they didn't have any first-place votes. Randomly, Virginia Tech is 6th with 5 first-place votes. But again, they're behind Louisville. So there must be a really wide dichotomy of answers for them. SMU, North Carolina, Georgia Tech, Cal, Duke, Syracuse, Pitt, BC, Wake Forest, Virginia, and Stanford rounds it out at number 17. This is a wild league. But at the top, again, the first 3 aren't shocking, but I thought Clemson would. And here's why. And this is why it's good for Florida State. Again, recruiting. If I said it 500 times, it wouldn't be enough. The perception of this is going to be very important. The top recruits want to play for the top schools. I remember a buddy of mine 25, 30 years ago going, why does Florida State always get the top class or at least top 2 or 3? And this for I was even in the meet, I just followed recruiting. And I'm like, because they want to play on great teams. They all think they can come in and play, whether it's realistic or not. And Florida State was just depth and loaded, like mid-90s. And I'm like, that's not really shocking. And part of it's they had that great 93 team. They were good. They probably should have won at 91 or 92, but they didn't. They ended up having that run after that, though, because kids wanted to play on these teams. They had a great year last year. If they maximize on this poll and have a great season, you could see Florida State absolutely recruit at a different level, no matter what approach they take with the new scholarship thing. And you can go back and look at the podcast I did on that a few days ago. But it's fun to talk about Florida State having a dominant roster again. It's fun talking about Florida State being expected to be at the top of the heap. So again, 81 first place votes. Clemson was 55. Now the other part with this that's fun, what are the schedules? And this, I mean, you can look at this any way you want, but we'll talk about Florida State's schedule first. I guess I could share my screen here and we'll go from there. But it's fun to look at all the different things that they've got with these schedules. But Florida State's is a little bit different than anybody else's, in my opinion, because Florida State opens in Ireland. They play earlier, and it's a conference team, somebody that knows you. I don't really think that that's a bad thing, but if you think about Florida State here and you look at their schedule beyond it, is it super difficult? Not necessarily. But remember last year, the second game is Boston College. It's like a Monday night game. It's kind of random. But that's Thomas Castellanos. He gave Florida State trouble. I'd imagine they're going to be pretty interested in being serious about that game. Memphis lost a bunch of their offensive linemen, but they do have Seth Hennigan and some good receivers. They're a pretty well-coached team. Memphis could give Florida State problems, but I think they're going to struggle blocking Florida State. And I also think Florida State's offensive line, with their experience, they should spring a couple of big runs. DJ may not have to throw more than 15 to 18 times in that game. They might with screens and all, but I think they'll run over Memphis. I have no problem saying that I don't respect Cal enough to beat Florida State. But this is, again, when you're ranked in the top 10, picked to win the ACC, you are the hunted. This is the kind of game that can be a lazy, sleepy, just terrible game because you're not ready. You better be. If you're not, that can be a problem. By the way, the Memphis game's at 11 a.m. That is a horrific time for a big-time program to open a game. The students won't come out because they're going to be half crocked from the night before. That's going to be tough for Florida State. They better play good against Memphis in the first quarter. They got FSU going to SMU on the 20th. That's the first one that I'm kind of curious about. The quarterback at SMU is good. They got a good tight end. They've got a couple other players that have an opportunity to have pretty big years. They've got some defensive guys transferred from Miami and stuff. But I have no idea what that hodgepodge is going to be. But again, like the schedule, just going through it, it's not super difficult. But then there's the two that matter most. They got Clemson at home after they play against SMU. It's the exact next week. So road game, not super hard, but not easy. Come home, you play Clemson. They go on the road the next week. They go to Duke. They lost too much. They got a new coach. I think they're going to struggle and kind of come back to the median for what they are. But again, that's a team because of Florida State's ranking. There's another chance to prove we are a top 10 team because we take everybody serious, and we're going to go out and beat you. We're going to improve our program. All the recruits are going to see that. That's the same thing over and over again. And then finally, the week after that, it's the big one. They got to play at Miami. That's always a rivalry game that's going to be watched by everybody. It's one of the reasons I followed Florida State for so long, because Florida State and Miami rivalry is just tremendous. But at the same time, you got to prove it in their house. Half that stadium will probably be Florida State because Miami has probably the most disloyal fan base in all of major college football, but it's still going to be loud. You have to come out in that game and play good. By then, you shouldn't have more than one loss, if any. Maybe you lose the Clemson game, but other than that, you should be in the top 10. And if they are at that point and they beat Miami, whether they're undefeated or not, again, you're on track to make the playoff. All that attention from the preseason goes through. Florida State should be a team that honestly is getting a lot of positive pub, and the program's kind of on track. 2 years in a row, plus a pretty good end to the 2022 season. Florida State's going to get a lot of things going for it, but you just can't teach. The media's going to do it for you. It's going to be transcribed by them because how you played as the hunted, and I love that. North Carolina, I think, is going to take a major drop. That's the next game. It's at home. Florida State has to travel to South Bend to play Notre Dame. That game, until I see the weather forecast within 24 hours of playing there, I don't like really picking anything with northern games that time of year because the weather can go 60 degrees or it can be 15 degrees. South Bend on November 9th. Keep in mind, South Bend's 5 minutes literally from the state of Michigan. It could be snowing, it could be raining, it could be sunny. Lord only knows, but that'll definitely be a tough environment, the most difficult game they play in. Then they got Charleston Southern, and then they got the Gators at home. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I picked Florida State to go 11-1 this year, but at the same time, the most important thing is the expectation that goes along with it. It's one thing to surprise everybody. That's not going to help recruiting nearly as much. When you are the hunted and you come out and you still beat teams, that's the most important thing to do. As far as the ACC, to wrap up the predictions, we'll go over some of the scheduling for the other two teams at the top, Clemson, and then we'll also go over Miami here in just a moment. But I think that showing this is kind of important because Florida State's schedule might be one of the reasons that so many people have them in the top 10 and pick to win the ACC. Your schedule matters. If you don't think so, go look at Florida's schedule. I'm not going to pull it up. I've talked about it many times here at Locked On Seminoles. That schedule is ridiculous. Not only do they end with the Noles, they got like LSU and Ole Miss. They got Georgia, et cetera, in the back end. Like their last 5 games in Missouri, they probably will be the underdog in all 5. Hard to imagine Florida being an underdog in all 5. So while Florida State's schedule is pretty normal, pretty down the middle for them, there are other teams that are going to struggle more. So with that, we're going to wrap up the show. We're talking more about the schedules and why I think the Noles actually have an advantage over Clemson and Miami. And it's more about psychology with this. Right back with Locked On Seminoles. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Let's talk a little bit about the schedule comparison. We just went over Florida State, and I think it's one of the reasons they were picked by the ACC or in the media from the ACC media days to win the league. But there's also the other side of it. You got to look at like Clemson in particular. I'll at least go over this one. I think their schedule, they have two major disadvantages compared to Florida State. And I'll share my screen and we'll talk about that right now. Number one, when you start your season with Georgia, I don't care what you're going to do. Even if you win that game, you are physically going to be beat up. Georgia and Clemson, I believe it's going to be played in Mercedes-Benz, if I was to guess. That's going to be tough. By the way, that's an 11 a.m. game. I just realized that. That's crazy. But that's going to be tough. I don't think that Clemson is going to beat Georgia, and I don't think anybody will, honestly. But to open the season with them after you had a year like they did where they were just as non-clutch as they were, huge advantage to Florida State, because if they get stomped like 31-10, and I have no idea what the spread is, I'm sure Georgia's favored. But if they do, that's going to take down A, their confidence, and B, they're going to take some attrition in that game. Again, I don't care what you do. That's a big physical football team. Alabama's probably the strongest team in college football. I'd imagine it's going to be hard on Clemson. Also, before they play Florida State, they host NC State on September 21st. That's another very physical team, so that'll help Florida State. And I think, again, it's one of the reasons they're ranked towards the top of most polls and are the number one overall. You can't have games like that, and then they got Stanford week 4. That's kind of a nice advantage. You have two games like that, and then you have to go to Florida State. That's the second biggest disadvantage. They lost at home last year, the Noles, and then they come to Doak this year. Florida State's overdue to beat them at home, by the way. I think that that's going to be a beat-up football team. They do get Stanford. That is a nice little bump because Stanford might be the worst team in the league, and they're actually picked there. But I like Florida State over Clemson in the head-to-head. They're at home. They've got a better situation than what Clemson does because they got two really physical games ahead. Just for the record, they've got a tough game against Louisville at home. That's November 2nd. Louisville will be good. I don't know if they'll be great. Clemson has to go to Virginia Tech. Do not sleep on Virginia Tech. They've got a really good quarterback in Drones. Got a pretty good coaching staff, and they're recruiting better. That's an interesting program. They go to Pitt, no big deal. They host South Carolina. So the back end of their schedule is not that tough in the final three if they beat Pittsburgh. I don't think South Carolina is going to be that good. Prove me wrong. And just to finish out, like Miami, this is the interesting thing. I just don't trust Miami until otherwise seen. I'm sorry for that. I just don't. I want to pull up their schedule here next. All right. They just don't do it for me. I don't trust them in a game that really matters, like the Florida State game, etc., after the Georgia Tech game last year. Maybe I'm wrong for saying that, but that's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Here is Miami's schedule. All right. They've got the Florida game. Florida just lost, by the way, if you haven't seen, they just lost their running back probably for a while, had his knee scoped. That's going to be hard on UF. I think Miami will win that game, but it wouldn't shock me if they lost. They just find ways to do it. They got to go to South Florida. They'll win. Virginia Tech on September 21st is the first game that I'm really curious. Mobile quarterbacks giving them problems. Drones should be in a rhythm by then. We'll see. Miami has to go out to Cal. They should win, but this is the kind of game that they have lost for 2 decades. They have one of these games every year. You're just like, how did they lose that game? Would not shock me. I'm still going to pick Miami, but that scares me. And then they have an unfortunate thing. So you go all the way to the West Coast, you come home, and you play Louisville, go on the road. So is that good? You're going to fly back to Miami, then you got to go to Louisville, then you come home and stay the week, and you got Florida State. So you got 2 road games prior to. The only thing good there, they do get a week off. I see that now. Miami hosts or goes to Louisville, they get a week off, but 2 road games, that's not ideal. And then they got Miami, or Florida State's got Miami on the road. I still think that'll be a half and half. The fan base at Miami will sell their tickets. They don't sell out. It's just not a loyal fan base. Finishing up their schedule, they host Duke, they go to Georgia Tech. I'm sure they'll be motivated for that game. They host Wake Forest, and they go to Syracuse. It's the easiest schedule in the ACC. But do you really trust them against Florida? They should win, but will they? Do you really trust them against Virginia Tech? Do you trust them against Cal, at Louisville? The Florida State game speaks for itself. I mean, I just don't. Georgia Tech, if they lose the Wake Forest or Syracuse game, I know I'm kind of like down, but like I still have a hard time picking them not to win like 10 games. Their schedule is by far the easiest. But I'll be wrong like most people because I want to say FanDuel has them at 9.5. If I remember right, that might have changed, but I know even Bud Elliott thinks that Florida State has the harder schedule, and he thinks Miami 10-2 is his conservative record. He's told me that multiple times. And keep in mind, Bud is a humongous Florida State fan. So he's being honest. But the schedule does favor Florida State or Miami over Florida State in terms of this next season. Now, final point about all this, again, just to kind of wrap it up, Florida State has a golden opportunity. First time they've been ranked in the top 10 since 2017. They're the pick to win the ACC, even without Jordan Travis, even without Keon and Johnny, Jaheim, all these exciting playmakers. They lost several guys like Jared Verse to the NFL. You got corner going to the San Francisco 49ers second round, et cetera, et cetera. You have all these guys, and they're still ranked. People respect you. And when they put you up there in the polls, that is going to help your program be elevated in front of all the recruits. I'm a recruiting guy, and if you watch this podcast, you know it. There's no way in the world that you shouldn't expect Florida State to take advantage of this. They got the right staff. I'm very confident. They got conservatively a top 10 overall coaching staff in college football. Just be real conservative. But I love what they have, and you're going to find out right off the bat if they're going to earn it, if they believe in themselves, or if they're taking things lightly on the 24th when they play in Ireland against Georgia Tech. It's that simple. This schedule sets up nicely. The polls do. Everything is positive right now. I'm not the most positive guy in general. I tell it like it is, but I'm pretty excited about everything with all the different things that I've seen. I think Florida State's going to have a great year. Prove me wrong. I've got them 11-1 as a projection. They'll lose one of the games. You know, it's hard to say which one. They'll lose one game, but that's my pick, and I think they'll capitalize on it. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Please like this podcast. Please subscribe. Please rate and review. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts for free and on YouTube. And again, thank you for tuning in. Truly appreciate it. There's going to be a lot of Florida State football discussion coming up over the next few months. Florida State's got a chance to make the playoff. Let's enjoy it and have a great day.